After watching and working through this lesson, you will be able to create 3D experiences using RealityComposer and Xcode. Hey Code Crew, this is Flo. In the last lesson, you learned a combine-based architecture you can use to communicate between your SwiftUI views and the AR experience. In this lesson, we will be having a look at creating 3D experiences using the RealityComposer app. After that, we will be going right back to Xcode to add these models and according animations to our AR app. So I've just created a brand new project in RealityComposer, and one very important thing to note here is there's also an iPad version of RealityComposer. Personally, I actually prefer using the iPad version, and then you can just airdrop or use whatever share method that you like to get the file from RealityComposer to Xcode on your Mac. For the sake of the recording, I'm using the Mac version of RealityComposer. Speaking from my experience, they are practically the same feature-wise, so you're good to go using either of the approaches. I just found the iPad version to feel a bit more natural while using it, but in the end, it should be the exact same thing in both Mac and iOS or iPadOS. So RealityComposer, what does it actually do? It's not really a 3D modeling tool like Blender would be. You could think of it as you already have a 3D model and now you can convert it into a Reality project or a RealityComposer project that allows you to add animations and to add interactions with your model and your app. So when you create a new document, you must first choose an anchor, and we've already covered these anchors in one of the previous lessons. For simplicity's sake, we will just use an horizontal anchor. Now the description here says for tabletop and horizontally based experiences. So for example, we will just be placing an object on the ground, which is a horizontal plane. So let's hit choose. And then you will see a new toolbar open up on the right hand side. And there are already two objects here in our scene. So we can navigate the scene moving around by sliding two fingers on my trackpad, and it will probably be the same with a mouse. I quite frankly have to admit I've never used a mouse with a Mac before. I'm always a MacBook kind of guy. But you can of course also zoom out, you can rotate the scene, and then you can move around with just a two-finger pan basically. We don't actually need these two objects here, so let's click on the cube and then hit the backspace key to get rid of it, and then the same for this select to edit thing here. Let's also get rid of that. So now we have an empty scene here and we can start playing around with RealityComposer. So first of all, we have our toolbar here in the top right corner. And to get started, we will add an object in the center of the scene here. So we will click the add button, and then you will see that there is a huge library of pre-existing objects here that you can use. You can of course also import your own 3D models. For the sake of this video, we will be using one of the predefined ones here, and let's have a quick scroll through so you can see just how many different models already are included with RealityComposer. The one that we will be using is a skateboard, so I will just drag and drop that onto about the center of the scene, and now here we could move it around and so on. I prefer not doing that with the mouse / trackpad. I prefer doing it with these with the transform property here in the inspector on the right. So right now you can see it's not really in the center of the scene, so moving around here you can see that the position values for X, Y, and Z coordinates change. I want the skateboard to be exactly in the middle of the scene, so I will just hit this little reset button here, then it will be perfectly centered in the scene. We could also play around with the rotation and rotate it around the x-axis. I have no idea why you would actually want to do that, so let's reset that as well. Then of course you could also play around with the scale. I will just try to get it back to 100%. Okay, there it is. So you can see just a very standard 3D model transform property here with position, rotation, and scale. Nothing very special. And there is something special here though, and this works because we're using one of the pre-built models and not our own model. We can choose between a stylized, an iconic, or a realistic style. And since we're crafting an AR experience, I would figure we would just go for the realistic style. You can also make this 3D object participate in physics using a material and a collision shape, but I think that's way too deep down the rabbit hole for this course. So if you're interested in making games, then this is probably very relevant to you. But then again, if you're making games, you're probably not using RealityComposer. You're probably just using Unity 3D or something like that. And then, of course, you can also add an accessibility label and a detailed description. We will skip that for now. So this is already our 3D object that we will be placing in the AR view. So it's just a skateboard placed on a horizontal anchor. Now, the interesting part here is until now, we could have just imported this 3D model into Xcode and use it in ARKit/RealityKit just as is, because right now we have not changed anything about this model. And this is where RealityComposer gets interesting, because we can now, instead of using the Properties tab, go to the Behaviors tab, and you will see a new section pop up at the bottom of the screen. And here we can add interactions paired with animations for our objects. So if we hit this little plus icon here, you will see a small pop-up, and there are a bunch of predefined behaviors, and there's also the ability to create a custom behavior. First of all, we will have a look at a predefined one. Later on, we will build our own custom behavior and have a look at how you can actually start that behavior from code. So let's just select tab and flip here, and you will see a new behavior getting added to the list. There is always a trigger to each behavior, so an action that has to take place in order for this behavior to start. And then there is an action sequence. Right now, it's just one action. Let me see if I can make this a bit bigger. Looks like I can't. Okay, so right now there's just one action here in the sequence. It's the emphasize action, and it has a bunch of different settings. So first of all, one object is affected, which is the skateboard here, because we had it selected, I believe. The duration is 1.03 seconds. And if we hit reset, that's just the standard duration of this effect. Then there's a motion type, in this case called flip. And there's a style, in this case we're using the basic style. Now we can preview this action by just pressing this play button here to preview this single action, or this play button up here to preview a sequence of actions. We just have one in this case, so hitting either of the two will be fine. Let me zoom out a bit. You will see just a flip. I would call this maybe an impossible if you're into skateboarding. We can play around with the duration. Let's make it a bit longer or a lot longer. You will see that obviously works as expected. And then we can change the style to, for example, playful. Okay, that's very interesting. What happens if we change it to white? Now I'm really interested. Okay, so maybe that's not one you would ever use. So let's go back to basic and let's tweak the duration to be about 3 seconds, just so it's nice and slow and anyone can view it. Okay, so this is one of the predefined behaviors. Let's now create our custom behavior, and then I will show you how to use both of them in Xcode. So let's hit the plus icon again, go back into our popover here, scroll down to custom. Now we have our second behavior. Click anywhere inside of this rectangle here to add a trigger, and there are a bunch of different triggers. Like, for example, if the user taps on this skateboard on their iPhone screen while it's visible in the AR view, that will trigger the action. When the scene starts, the action is triggered. When it's in proximity to the camera, and so on and so on. The one I will show to you, because it's the most versatile one, is the notification trigger. This means that we can actually trigger this action through a notification, which is just a piece of code that we can write. It's a one-liner. It's very simple. I'll go over that in a few minutes. So first of all, let's give this notification a behavior, and I will just call it my skateboard trick. We can add an accessibility label again. Once again, not part of this lesson. We will just jump in the action sequence. So let's press this rectangle here, or let's click into it again. And then you can see there are tons of different actions that you could, that you could play here. I will just go with the emphasize one again. So right now we don't have the skateboard selected. So let's select it and then hit done. if you missed how that works, you just press choose here, select the object that you want to get influenced by this action, then press done again. So this is not done automatically if you add your own actions. Okay, then the duration of 1 second, that should be fine. And for the motion, let's do spin, and for the style, let's do wild. Let's have a look at this. Yeah, this is nice. Just a little 360 basically. Okay, so going over it real quick again, we had this default behavior where if the user taps the skateboard on their screen, then this animation here will be played. And then we added our custom one where if we send a notification through code, then this animation here will get played. Okay, so with that being done, let's hit Command S or go to File, Save, select the location to save this to. So I will just save it here into my development file, and I will just call it Skateboard. The file name here is rather important because that will actually get auto-generated into a code snippet for you that we will just use in a second in Xcode. So yeah, keep that in mind when naming this file. So let's hit save. And now we can go over to Xcode. I have our AR course open here that we already worked through in the previous episodes. And let me quickly open up a Finder window to drag in this file that we just exported. Okay, so here I have our skateboard.rc project. That's just a file extension that RealityComposer uses. Let me drag that into Xcode, and I'll just drag it here right below the assets catalog. Make sure to always check copy items if needed. You always want to do this when adding any type of file to Xcode. Otherwise, if you remove that file from its original location, it will also be gone from Xcode. Okay, so always make sure to say copy items if needed. Also make sure that it's added to the target of your main app. Let's hit finish here. And then we can open it by just clicking on it, and you will see a small little preview here. And there's a button to open this scene in RealityComposer as well, but we will not be needing that. Okay, so now let's create a new AR action to place this skateboard. So let's go to AR action. Let's say case place skateboard. So we already had an action to place a block with a certain color, and we had an action to remove all anchors. Now we're just adding an action to place a skateboard. Let's go into our subscribe to action stream function here. Action stream function here in our custom AR view. This is the place where we actually perform the actions. So let's add the new case of place skateboard. Now we can just say let skateboard equals try. Now this can fail, so we probably want to wrap this in a do catch block. And for now we will just print out the error. This is just a tutorial series, so we're just printing out the error. In your actual app, you definitely want to let the user know that an error happened and perhaps restore some error-free state that you had beforehand. Okay, so let skateboard equals try, and this is where the code generation magic comes in place. Skateboard, this is now a brand new type available to us in Xcode, dot load scene. So you will see these errors go away, and while the syntax highlighting doesn't work, this is actually generated code. You don't have to care about anything with this file. It's all part of that. Very cool stuff in my opinion. So now we have this skateboard here, and next we can say scene.add anchor, and this is basically just an anchor. So let's pass in that skateboard here, and that works just fine. Okay, so we captured self. Okay, so let's say self optionally .scene.add anchor. That should fix this little error here. Once again, this is just because we had a weak self capture clause here in our sync method. Okay, so now whenever our custom AR view receives the place skateboard AR action, it will load the skateboard scene from our RC project file and then add it as an anchor to our current AR scene. Next, let's add a second action to do our 360 animation. So let's add a new case to our AR action enum, and I will just call this play skateboard animation. Going back to the custom AR view, let's add another case here. And now we're running into a bit of an issue because we actually need to access our skateboard and we haven't saved it anywhere. So an easy solution would be to have a look at the type here, which is skateboard.scene. Let me quickly copy that. And then I can just create a private var skateboard with that type. Let's make it optional and let's make it nil in the beginning. Okay, so now that we have this variable here, let's actually use it. So after adding the skateboard to the scene, let's also say self.skateboard equals that skateboard. That way we have saved it for later use. And then here we can just say skateboard question mark because this is an optional. Then we can say .notifications. Remember, we used the notifications trigger in RealityComposer. And then there is already a pre-generated piece of code here, my skateboard trick. This is what we called the behavior that we added in RealityComposer. And then we can just call the post method. So also super simple stuff. And I once again forgot that we weakly capture itself here. So now that should work. Going over it once again, we're loading the skateboard and then we add it as an anchor to the scene when we want to place it. And then to play the skateboard animation, we just take our skateboard, access the notifications, use or access the my skateboard trick notification that we added as a behavior, and then just say post. Now let's go into our content view. And we had a horizontal scroll view here with a bunch of different actions. So let's create two new ones, one to place the skateboard and one to make it do the trick. So let's create a new button and I will just call this one place. And in here we will say AR manager.shared.actionstream.send our place skateboard action. So this is the basically exact same code snippet that we used beforehand to remove all anchors or to place a block with a certain color. And now let's also make sure that this has the same styling as all of our other buttons. So the same size, padding, background and corner radius. And then let's copy that entire button and let's call the second one 360. And then let's send the play skateboard animation notification here. Okay, so let's run that on an iPhone and have a look at how it works. All right. So in this lesson, you learned about using RealityComposer to craft your own 3D experiences, including 3D models, behaviors, triggers, and animations. You learned about how RealityComposer works, how you can use the 3D objects, that you can add some standard behaviors, for example, if the user taps on an object, and then also how to create some more custom behaviors, which you can control through code, through sending so-called notifications to your objects. You learned about how to import these RealityComposer files into Xcode, and that you also learned that Xcode auto-generated some code for you to use them. I think this is a very, very, very nice tool provided to us by Apple, and it will probably come in handy sooner or later if you work on your own AR apps.